Bush. And here on page 218 again, you talk about a man that, Lew Wolf, a pleasant-faced, gray-bearded man who lost one of his legs to a bizarre circulatory condition acquired during a long plane flight back from Southeast Asia. I delivered a 24-page, carefully documented summary of these and other shocking statistics during his sentencing hearing before Judge Malin Faircloth in January of 2009. And he experienced the American war in Laos. Mm-hmm. And the planes used to come back from North Vietnam, and they dropped their extra bombs in Laos. And we weren't even at war with Laos.
Yeah.
And
that had a real impact on him.
Yes.
Yeah. If that was sort of your question. It's
yes.
Like, it's an interesting thing when you have the opportunity to be overseas and you're thrown into a situation that you might not have expected, or if you're sent there believing, you know, the great American myth that we're just going into foreign lands to bring democracy, and then you get there and you find another reality. It has a way of, for me, it turned my world upside down. I mean, when I lived in the Middle East, I had people telling me that about imperialism, which, you know, in those days you couldn't even say the word. Today it's just like widely acknowledged. We are an imperial power. We are the world superpower. But in those days, even then, it was very hard for me to accept that my country was looking after its self-interest first and foremost, and then to see a lot of suffering when I was over there. People living in refugee camps, not just Palestinians, but Armenians. I mean, I remember going by refugee camps, and this was in the 60s, and the stench, it was horrible. They had no sanitation. They were desperately poor. These were the first victims of the Great Game. It was the Armenians, which is a whole other story. But anyway, it has an impact. I mean, when you see human suffering, it can change your life. And that's what happened with Lew Wolf. And then Lew Wolf, what does he end up doing? He not only does he protest at the School of Americans and actually got sentenced and served time. It was house arrest because he had he was an amputee, but earlier he ended up being the publisher of Covert Action Weekly magazine, which ran for, I don't know, geez, at least a decade or two, focused on all sorts of antics by the CIA. And why did he do it? Because he felt like the United States, the American people were being misinformed about what we were doing abroad, and he was determined to expose what we were doing.
He's also one of the writers for Rock Creek Press.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I focused on this edition of the Rock Creek Press in one of my earlier shows regarding the World Trade Center and the explosives that were found there. And he went to house arrest, was
yes.
it, for protesting at the School of the Americas, and that's the same thing that happened to our friend Robin Lloyd. Mm-hmm. She's well known here in Burlington.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, Robin. Yes, and in fact, Robin was very helpful to me in my campaign. We set up campaign headquarters. Basically out of her house, her house and her office, and she was, I mean, that shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody who knows Robin, because she's very dedicated to human rights. And you know, come to think of it, Robin has some experiences abroad too. Her father was the publisher of Toward Freedom magazine, and that was very sympathetic to the struggles of what was then known as the non-aligned movement, third world countries that were trying to chart their own course and not come under the sway of one power or another. And so he developed this magazine called Toward Freedom, and my recollection is she would sometimes go abroad with him, and to Africa, among other places. So again, it's like if you have the opportunity to travel, I would urge people to do that because it really opens up your eyes and gives you a new perspective. It's very interesting
what you said that you got your master's degree at a university in Italy.
Yes.
In art history?
Yeah.
Which university was that?
Well, it was an American-credited university. It's called Villa Schifanoia, and then the official name Pope Pius XII Institute. It's a beautiful little villa in Italy that used to be the residence of the, let's see, I think it was the American Catholic bishop, or the representative to the Vatican owned it, and then he sold it to the school. And they do offer, certainly they did at the time, an American-credited master's degree in art history. So, yeah, I went there. I had majored in art history. One of the reasons was because when I was in Beirut with my mother, it's so hot during the summer that we actually got to go to Europe, and that's when I saw all this fantastic culture. I mean, the architecture, the painting. Again, a huge opening of eyes because, you know, our country's quite new, and here was this great culture, and I wanted to know more about it. So that's why I majored in it, but then ended up actually never really using that degree because then I got into journalism instead.
But I did something similar to that. While I was in law school in New York, I went during the summer. I went to Paris to study law, the European civil law system. And while I was in Paris, I discovered that it was possible for Americans to study at the Sorbonne, the University of Paris. So after I got finished law school, I went to I enrolled at the University of Paris, and I studied art history there as a mechanism to become fluent in French. I had studied French in high school here for 3 years, but after studying at the University of Paris, I became fluent.
There you go. So
I thought that was a great experience.
It was, wasn't it? I mean, for me, it was a great experience too. I had to learn Italian, and all my courses were in Italian. I had to write papers in Italian. But I met the curators of the Uffizi, one of the most famous museums in the world, and the Accademia, where the famous Michelangelo's David statue stands. And here I was with some of these renowned art history curators and professors and museum experts. It was a beautiful experience for me too. Yeah.
But you're a licensed attorney here in Vermont, right?
Yes.
So I think we should keep that in mind when we read this book, The People versus Bush, that this is written by an expert in the law that really knows what it's all about.
Well, I have to say that I owe a debt of gratitude to the legendary prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, who some people may know as the man who prosecuted the Manson gang. This is for people in our generation who remembered that dreadful murder of Sharon Tate and some other people. I think it was 5 others in Hollywood. And he rose to prominence over his highly publicized trial. And then he's a very well-known prosecutor. I think he convicted the defendants in 105 out of 106 felony cases. And so he's highly, highly regarded among prosecutors and among lawyers themselves. Jerry Spence thinks the world of him, and also, well, other famous lawyers. He's sort of a lawyer's lawyer. So he had come out and written a book called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. And my friend Robin Lloyd had seen the book and called me up one day, and she said, "Have you seen this book?" She said, "I hear it's already becoming a bestseller." And I mean, what a provocative title, Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. So she put it in my hands, and I, at the time I had agreed to run for Attorney General had been asked by the Progressive Party. They needed a candidate to run a statewide race and get at least 5% of the vote so that we could maintain major party status.
You were the one who got the 5%.
I did get the 5%. I think one other person got the 5%. I think certainly Martha Abbott must have gotten it. But I got 5.9%. So that's how I started it.